Welcome to Encounter, where we celebrate putting faith into action and community leaders who live out compassion, grace, and love. We're a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that addresses food insecurity through CHOW and the Greater Good Grocery, provides hospital and jail ministry, builds wheelchair ramps, and assists neighbors with transportation and shopping services through Faith in Action volunteers. We invite you to the conversation. Encounter your neighbors as we learn to walk together in love and kindness.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today, Joe Sellepack, Executive Director at the Broome County Council of Churches. It's amazing where my job takes me and how I get to meet different people. I walked into a Bible study that was being offered by Christ the King Luther, and I'd been asked by the leader of the Bible study to do a section on the book of Genesis. And there I met a man named Todd Eames. Todd Eames was a member of the Bible study. And since then, Todd and I have become, I think we're pretty good friends.
Very good friends, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Todd Eames, he's the mission coordinator now at Journey of Faith Church, and it's a Lutheran spin-off kind of thing. That's currently getting, we'll talk a little bit about that. But Todd, you've been on an interesting journey, I think, in a lot of ways. And you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, like your family, and maybe what you did for a living, and what you're currently working on.
Sure. I was born and raised on the west side of Binghamton, and I've been here my whole life except for the various colleges. Then I worked for the Office of the State Comptroller for 30 years, and I just retired last year as an auditor and went up through the ranks there.
And you were a treasurer for the board of directors for the Broome County Council of Churches for a period of time too, right?
With my financial experience, I was treasurer for the Council of Churches. I'm also treasurer for our synod as well, so I still stay in finance.
You can't get away from it.
Nope.
Huh?
I like numbers a lot. But I retired last year, and then 2 weeks after my retirement date, I started attending seminary in Gettysburg, United Lutheran Seminary. It's through a special program called the Theological Education and TEAM. TEM it's emerging theological education for emerging ministries. That's what it's called. So I like to refer to myself as a teaminarian. The program is designed for people who have like a full-time job or busy lifestyles. So I have plenty of time with because I'm retired now. But I go to class for a week at a time, and there'll be 12, 13-hour days crammed with school. And learning and conversation. Then there's thousands of pages of readings and hundreds of pages of writings that are required for the coursework. So I'm about halfway through that. It's a 3-year process, and I hope this fall to start the CPE here locally. You and I had talked about that.
Clinical pastoral education.
Right, and I think that setting will be in one of the local hospitals, and that's an immersion, life-changing experience from what I understand. So that's still in front of me. And then I will have another year and a half of education through the seminary.
So it's interesting, my wife and I, Shelley and I and Dan were down in Texas once, and there was this guy that said, try this carrot cake, it's going to change your life. And I said, well, everybody's got to take that leap, right?
I don't want my life to change.
If you had the opportunity to have a life-changing experience, you might as well go down that road, right? So, as far as this whole experience has been, have you found yourself changing in different ways, or how has this impacted you?
Yeah, the change in me started years ago, I think, with and it's referred to as the call story. But this particular experience is just one. I being not young anymore, I was curious how much my brain was going to take more, learning new things. I was also concerned that I might have to learn Greek I heard that's a traditional part, and Hebrew, that's a traditional part of seminaries, but I guess that's all, like it's all in software now and applications that you can use. I might not have to know Greek and Hebrew because my brain is not geared for a new language.
Yeah, well, I had to take Greek and Hebrew. It was an interesting process of trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. One of the things they did for me was told me how complex the role of interpretation is, mm-hmm. and how many different variances there are in various texts throughout the Bible. So it's kind of interesting how seminary education itself has evolved along with like emerging second career type folks. Have you met other people that are in the similar space as what you're currently in? I'm
actually in this team program. Yes, I'm actually average, if not even a little younger than the average age in the program. And in my cohort currently, there's 15 people from around Pennsylvania and New York and New Jersey. We gather there, and we're all in the same program, different phases of it. But most of them are, I think all of them are second career, at least in this team program. So yeah, it happens.
And like as far as like you said you were a numbers guy, mm-hmm. and you kind of lived in that space for a long period of time. Working around accounting. One could say that accounting is clean, though I know you were like kind of a nuanced auditor having to deal with fraud and other kinds of stuff, mm-hmm. like that. So you understand that it's not always clean, mm-hmm. but numbers are easy, but dealing with people is just a little bit different than that, right? So like how is that kind of played out a little bit in your thinking and in your role, especially as mission coordinator with Journey of Faith?
Saying it's a little bit different is an understatement. It's considerably different. With numbers, there is a certain predictability, and when you get to a solution, you can tell if it's right or wrong, and then rework it if you need to. With dealing with people, there's none of that. You can sort of sense that there's something wrong or there's something right, but there's no going back. You just deal with it as it comes. Where my skills that I've found more valuable is way back when I was in college. It was my bartending skills, and working in hotels at the front desk when I was way back in college. Those skills of just being able to be flexible and accepting, and the customer's always right attitude, type of thing, and it helps open up conversation with folks. I think because I have met folks from all walks of life. In this experience, and from all over the country, because in my mission development training, I was in Chicago for a couple of days, and I met people from all over the country. Mission developers are what the ELCA call folks who are developing new missions, to be repetitive, but it's essentially a new church that started. So there's across the country, I would guess there's upwards of 80 or 100 new starts for worship communities in the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, in America, is across the country. There's upwards of 100, I would guess. I don't write that down. That's not exact. But I got to meet lots of folks, other mission developers like myself in those trainings, and there's networks of those. So I have like networks of people that I've met in this experience. Which is similar to what I had in my career too. I knew lots of people through different circumstances, and then by the way, there's scripture in there too, which is a whole nother nuance of life, and being able to just deal and be flexible with understandings and other people's understandings in conversation and in worship services and in public spaces too. Like we've had a presence for the last couple of years at the local Pride Festival, and we're also have given away like hot dogs at Otzingo. So that's how we meet lots and lots of people and just get to talk about their experiences with church. So.
And what kind of conversations have you had with people about their experiences at church? Like what's
from the those who have absolute understandings of church, and they concern me. I like my experiences. Although I don't have your experience with Scripture, if you think you know everything there is to know about the Bible, I don't think that's possible. And there are people out there that know absolutely what, or think they know absolutely what is to know about the Bible. I am not one of those people. Two people who have never heard, or they've heard of Jesus, but they haven't really opened a Bible, or could even begin talking about that. And I like to talk to both of them, and across the spectrum of folks between those two understandings. And I'm really amazed how comfortable people are in public spaces to talk about their faith or their lack of faith.
And that kind of flies in the face a little bit, like when they tell you the subjects that you need to avoid, like over Thanksgiving dinner, and religion and politics are the two things. But but it seems to me, and I'll say this as a person who sometimes has to get on an airplane, that as soon as somebody finds out that you're a minister, or that you have ministry training or something, they almost automatically start talking about religion. It's amazing to me how many conversations I've had with people over the time on either their pain having to deal with a upbringing that was too strict, and they had their life and didn't somehow match what they were dealing with in church or whatever, to people who were convinced that there was this one person who I had a conversation with, and I think it was similar to someone that you met once, but who was convinced that the world was going to end, and that it all had to do with liberal politics, and so you end up with these various conversations with people, and so people seem to have that kind of background, and yet they still have a hunger for it, it, because I think there was a guy named Blaise Pascal who talks about and he is that Pascal, right? So Blaise Pascal was also a theologian who talks about the God-shaped hole that resides within each person, and that we somehow want to fill it with something, and so there's this hunger for something to fill that space, and so you enter into these conversations with people, and it's kind of interesting. How has being involved with that changed your perspective on faith in general?
It's actually affirmed my faith, my belief that faith is very personal. It's an individualized. You can't put a cookie cutter shape around it. You just used you said that a God-sized hole as opposed to a God-shaped hole. It's the size is enormous, but it can be filled. But the shape is unique. I think it's even more so than snowflakes. Everyone's experience with faith, I think, is unique to them. And I've hoped for that in my upbringing. I started attending church way back in 9th grade because I had to return Frank Zappa records to a friend of mine. And way back then, in my early beginnings in a life of faith, I thought I might have been, I don't know if I'm getting this, in 9th grade, in those very changing and formative years. And I hoped that was okay. And I've learned it's perfectly okay. There is no wrong way. Somebody once told me that you can't ruin worshiping God, and we should be worshiping God every day.
So my guest today is Todd Eames. He is the mission coordinator for Journey of Faith Church, and currently working on a Teams program with the Lutheran Church ELCA, and he's been on a journey himself, trying to get to the point where he's going to be a pastor of a church and ordained and all of that kind of thing. So, as far as Journey of Faith is concerned, can you share a little bit about the story of Journey of Faith now that we've kind of gone through your journey?
Sure. Journey of Faith started it was birthed from Christ the King Lutheran Church in Vestal. That's where you and I met, and I started attending there in the early 2000s. And they went through a couple of pastors that turnover, as is normal with many churches. And then eventually through a strategic visioning process, they decided that they would birth a new church, and it was called Nesting, where we started inside of Christ the King. And that's where we met. It was a small group of us that decided to, 5 or 6, I think 5, we started with, and we began with determining what kind of church would we want to start, if we could start from scratch. It was a double-edged sword of the freedom of having a clean slate, but also the burden of having a clean slate, that you could start with anywhere you wanted and go in any direction. So we started from that process, and what we decided was that we wanted to be a home-based church. After meeting at Christ the King on Wednesday nights for probably 6 months, we decided to move into one of our members' basements. They had it redone. It was amazing. They redid their basement in 2 weeks, and it was a new floor, new walls, new furniture, and that's where we meet. And we have a long banquet table in their basement, as well as couches and love seats and chairs, and where we work for worship space. But the entire space really is worship space, that they've opened up their basement to it. So we're a home-based church, and we're the first in a hopeful, what we hope for is a network of home-based churches. Part of the reason that we went towards the home-based church was to be more open. Sometimes a church facade or church building can be intimidating to people, so we didn't want to have that piece. I read a statistic a few years ago that in New York State, churches own some $50 billion in real estate. And I'm like, that's a lot of money. Where else can we use that for?
Yeah.
And the maintenance that goes with that. In my work with church finances that I've done, I've learned that building costs are among a huge burden for churches, and often can draw them down and take away from ministry. So we don't want to own a building. My bumper sticker for that is that I don't want to mow lawns. I already have a lawn. So we're a church that's a home-based church, and it's based on, there's a network of churches out in San Francisco that they have 17 home-based churches, and they come together once a month, and they'll meet in a park and they worship, and they might do a service project, they might just do a fellowship project, or just a simple presence in community. And across the 17 churches, from what I understand, 17 home churches, they have about 250, 300 people in worship attendance. So that's a pretty substantial church. I'm not sure how one pastor could manage 17 home churches. That would take a lot of co-leadership, I think. But that's our model that we're working toward. And so we're part of our tagline on our website. We're going to update it because we started with, we're building a church that we would want to attend. With that sort of nebulous sentence, but we need to update that because we've built the church. I think we're there, and now we're ready to replicate it. And it's taken about almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years, I think, this Christmas Eve. We kicked off on a Christmas Eve with a sermon of hope for the future.
And what are some of the things that you've learned through that? I mean, you started off in a congregation, mm-hmm. and as a nest of the congregation, then you moved into homes. And what are the values that you're kind of bringing with you into that? Because it seems to me as if there's, you're trying to make it more comfortable for people, mm-hmm. That kind of thing. What are some of the values that are driving that?
It's that the biggest value probably is the belief in the individual faith. Our style of worship is, I don't necessarily preach. There's one of my favorite phrases is, at all times preach the gospel, when necessary use words. So
St. Francis.
Correct. Yeah. So I'd like to say I preach all the time, but during worship, I just facilitate a conversation. So there'll be 10 or 12 of us gathered around, and we will discuss the scripture. We'll watch a video with somebody else's viewpoint on the scripture. I provide some context and then some, I hope, provoking questions, and we talk about it. And it really is everyone there, and we have extroverts and introverts, but because we're of the close connection and the intimate community we have, it's a very open conversation. And in the beginning, I tried to manage the conversation because I retired as being a manager and director, but there is no managing this conversation. So one of the things I learned is let go and let the Holy Spirit work, and she does too. One of my favorite lines from a song is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So that's every time I plan worship, I'm sure God is laughing. I've learned things that I never thought that would come out of conversations about particular scriptures. We started we don't follow the Revised Common Lectionary. We started and continue with a series of sermon series or topic series. And we started way back with the Lord's Prayer. So we wanted to unpack things that are traditional in a traditional church setting. We wanted to start our own traditions, whatever they may be. So we've gone through dozens of variations of the Lord's Prayer in our worship, and we say it in there's an indigenous peoples version that is just beautiful, and there's lots of beautiful ones. The prayers from New Zealand, the Iona community, there are lots and lots of, and then we've written our own. Then another example, we've unpacked the 10 Commandments, and we took 10 weeks to do that, 1 week each commandment, and talked about what the context of then in Exodus, in the original ancient context, to the times of Jesus, through history and today. We always try to bring everything from the ancient context through today, but we're starting. I wouldn't say we have our own traditions because we're still open and flexible. And I co-lead with another member, Joe Brunt. When I can't be there on a given Wednesday, he leads. And he does a great job as well. And the whole community is just very patient and open to asking honest questions that like a couple of years ago you might thought, well, I don't want to ask that question, it's dumb.
Right.
Truly, there is no dumb question.
And you're really getting to know each other. Like one of the frustrating things in church often, and this was something that really surprised me in my first congregation that I served after seminary, was that when you would have a death in the congregation, the folks that would come to the funeral weren't members of the church. They were people from other avenues or other places that people knew. So there was one time I there were some people in the church council that I kind of knew, and I asked them, why weren't people here for this person's funeral? And they said, well, I didn't really know them very well. And yet they had served together. They had been in church together for a long period of time. And it was like one of those curiosities. You scratch your head and you go, well, why not? Mm-hmm. And yet, it seems to me, as in this intimate setting, you're getting to the point where people are comfortable with each other, and they're allowing that space to become a place where people can ask honest questions authentically, mm-hmm. About themselves and about their faith. Mm-hmm. And that would be a very rich conversation, I would imagine, mm-hmm. And very, very personal at times.
With the size and the setting too, because it's more like a living room. It's far more like a living room than it is a sanctuary that we worship in. And with the 10, 12, 15 people at a given worship, there isn't any choice. It is very intimate. We've talked about whether or not we should stream our services, but I think we don't want to invade that intimacy. So I think we might start streaming or recording and posting the conversation piece, but not the whole worship. The reason I say that is because we open with, we call it God sightings, places where we've seen God or a need for God in the week prior. And that's, you might call that, other people might call that like the joys and concerns. But that gets really exposed. For people are going through some very personal times, and they share. I'm always impressed with the details and the specificity that people will share, and the vulnerability that just exists in that space is, to some, might be dangerous, but to others it's comforting. In the beginning, it's very uncomfortable, but then it gets for that person, I think. But then when you see the support that's reciprocated by your vulnerability, it's affirmed, and it builds. That's the cement that builds our community. When you said that if somebody passed away in our congregation, we would all be there.
Right.
You know, we'd be arguing over who would serve, and that's just we are a close knit family, really, and family of families, because we know each other's families too, and we ask. Even outside of worship, we have a text group and a Facebook group that we ask, how's this going? Like, connecting with each other.
So if a person were interested in learning a little bit more about Journey of Faith, how would they do that?
The first place, I think, is our webpage. It's journey-faith.org, O-R-G. And from there, we've got our history that we put up there, pictures of things that we've done, all of our worship, our sermon series, or conversation series that we've done are up there, so you could get a flair for what we talk about, as well as a description of what worship is. I like to characterize our worship is a dinner party more than it is a traditional worship. But there's a link to you can provide information. If anyone is interested in starting their own home church or wanted to join us, you can put your information there, and I'll reach out to you. And the reason for that is I don't like to post the location because it is someone's home. So to put that out in today's public, unfortunately, we used to have books of people's addresses.
Right.
Now you put somebody's address, and it's a risk. It's protected information for a reason. So there is a conversation that'll occur before, you can actually are invited to the setting that we have. We are also going to start having we're still in the planning phases, a worship service once a month in a public church, in a public space, a local church. That then people can just walk in there if they want, and it'll be the same kind of style. We'll have the meal, and it's a full dinner. It's not just a Jell-O souffle. It's good food. We eat good food, and it really is.
People should know that that's been part of your history too.
Absolutely,
he's a chef. He is a cook.
Right, I used to be. My very first career was in the hospitality restaurant, and when I was a chef and bartender. So this is actually my third career, but I get no benefits except for the personal ones from the restaurants.
Todd Eames is the coordinating mission coordinator for Journey of Faith Church, working toward ordination. Thank you for being on Encounter today and for sharing your journey as well as the journey of faith. And for all of you today, I hope that you would also find yourself on a journey, and that you would find your own faith and nurture it, and be able to be a nurturing presence for other people. I hope that you would be good and kind to each other, be generous with each other, and have a great day.